The ballroom went silent the moment Ren Calloway said the word no. Every candle seemed to flicker at once. Duke Julian Ashford stood frozen, his hand still stretched out toward her, waiting for an answer that never came the way he expected. For 12 years, he had been the one who refused. He had turned away duchesses, heiresses, and daughters of kings, and no one dared to question him. But tonight, a seamstress with ink stains on her fingers had just refused him in front of 300 guests, and the room could not breathe. Ren had not come to the ball for romance. She had come to secure a contract for her dress shop, nothing more. She had heard the stories about the Duke, how he crushed hopes without a second glance, how mothers wept after he dismissed their daughters in a single sentence. She had no interest in becoming his next disappointment. When he approached her and asked for a dance, she looked him straight in the eyes and said she was not interested, then turned and walked toward the door. Julian felt something he had not felt in 12 years, a jolt of surprise that cut through the numbness he had carried since his youth. Every woman before her had begged for his attention. This one had walked away as if he meant nothing at all. He found himself following her with his eyes across the room, unable to look away, unable to understand why her rejection stung more than every proposal he had ever refused. His mother, the Duchess Eleanor, watched the entire scene from her seat near the fireplace. She had spent years pushing her son toward marriage, terrified that the family line would end with him. She saw the way his jaw tightened when Ren disappeared into the crowd, and for the first time in over a decade, she saw a flicker of something alive in his eyes. She did not know the girl's name yet, but she knew her son had noticed her, and that alone was enough to make her heart race with hope. Outside, in the cold night air, Ren stood by her carriage and tried to steady her breathing. She told herself the encounter meant nothing, that dukes and their games had no place in her life. She had built her business from nothing after her father lost everything to bad debts, and she was not about to hand her freedom to a man who collected rejected brides like trophies. Yet as she climbed into her carriage, she could not stop thinking about the look on his face, as if she had struck him with something sharper than words. Neither of them knew it yet, but that single moment in the ballroom had already changed everything. The Duke who never chased anyone was about to break his own rule, and the woman who wanted nothing to do with him was about to become the one thing he could not walk away from. 3 days later, a carriage stopped outside Ren's small dress shop, and she nearly dropped the fabric in her hands when she saw the Duke himself step out onto the street. He walked in as if he owned the building. Though his eyes betrayed a nervousness he clearly was not used to feeling. He claimed he needed gowns made for his mother's birthday celebration, but Ren noticed he kept glancing at her rather than the fabric samples spread across the counter. She kept her tone polite but firm, refusing to let his title change how she spoke to him. Over the following weeks, Julian found reasons to return again and again. He requested fittings that did not need his presence, sent notes about fabric choices that any servant could have delivered, and appeared at events he knew Ren would attend as a vendor. His household staff whispered among themselves, stunned to see their master behave like a man chasing something instead of running from it. Ren remained cautious, aware that a duke's attention could ruin a woman's reputation as easily as it could elevate her business. Despite her guarded manner, something shifted between them during a quiet evening when a storm trapped them both inside her shop. With the rain pounding against the windows, Julian spoke about his childhood, about a house filled with rules and expectations, and about an engagement in his youth that ended in a way he refused to fully explain. Ren listened without judgment, and for the first time, she saw the man beneath the title, someone shaped by pain rather than arrogance. In return, she told him about her father, a man who gambled away their family home and left her mother begging relatives for help. She explained how she vowed never to depend on anyone again, building her shop stitch by stitch until it belonged to her alone. Julian listened closely, surprised by how much her fierce independence reminded him of his own need for control, though hers came from survival rather than privilege. As the weeks passed, their conversations grew longer and their silences grew more comfortable. Julian began arriving without excuses, simply asking to sit and talk while she worked. Wren found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit, even as a quiet fear grew inside her that getting close to him could cost her everything she had built. Meanwhile, whispers began spreading through the city about the Duke's strange new habit of visiting a seamstress's shop, and not everyone approved of what they were seeing unfold. One morning, a stranger arrived at Wren's shop before it even opened, wrapped in a heavy cloak that hid most of her face. She introduced herself as a former maid of the Ashford household and said she needed to speak with Wren alone. Her hands trembled as she explained that years ago, the Duke had been engaged to a woman named Isabel, and that Isabel had not simply vanished the night before her wedding, as everyone believed. The maid claimed the family had hidden the true story to protect their reputation, and she feared history was about to repeat itself with Wren. Wren felt her stomach twist as the woman spoke. She thanked her for the warning, though her mind raced with questions she was not sure she wanted answered. That evening, when Julian arrived at her shop with his usual quiet smile, she could not hide the tension on her face. She confronted him directly, repeating what the maid had told her, and watched his expression change from confusion to something darker, something heavier than she had ever seen on him before. Julian sat down slowly, running a hand through his hair as 12 years of silence finally cracked open. He explained that Isabel had not run away by choice. She had been threatened by his own cousin, a man desperate for the family fortune, and forced to disappear for her own safety. The family covered the truth not to protect Julian's name, but to protect Isabel from further danger, since the cousin still held influence within certain circles. Julian had carried the guilt alone for over a decade, believing that if he had been stronger or more aware, he could have stopped it from happening. Wren sat in stunned silence, her earlier suspicion melting into a mixture of sorrow and understanding. She realized the man in front of her was not cold or heartless, as the city believed, but someone who had built walls around himself simply to survive the weight of what he could not fix. Every rejected bride over the years had not been cruelty, but fear, a fear that trusting again would only lead to more loss. Yet the revelation left Wren shaken in a different way. If a woman close to Julian had once been in danger simply for being connected to him, she wondered what risk she herself might be inviting into her carefully built life. The warmth she had begun to feel toward him now sat tangled with worry, and for the first time since they met, she found herself unsure of what to do next, caught between the truth she now understood and the fear it had planted deep inside her. Despite the fear, Julian could not stop himself from asking the question that had been building inside him for weeks. He knelt beside her that same evening and asked Wren to marry him, not out of duty to his family name, but because she was the only person he had trusted enough to tell the full truth. His voice cracked slightly as he admitted that 12 years of guarded silence had left him lonelier than anyone knew, and she was the first light he had felt in all that time. Wren wanted to say yes, yet something inside her held back the words. She thought of her mother's tears after her father's failures, of the years she spent clawing her way to independence stitch by stitch. Marrying a duke meant stepping into a world of expectations, titles, and constant public attention, a world that had already swallowed one woman whole. She feared losing herself entirely, becoming nothing more than a duchess in name while her shop and her identity faded into memory. She told Julian she needed time, and though the disappointment on his face was clear, he did not push her the way she expected him to. Instead, he stepped back, respecting the boundary she had drawn, even as the distance between them grew heavier with each passing day. Wren threw herself into her work, taking on more clients than she could comfortably handle, trying to bury her confusion beneath fabric and thread. The distance between them might have remained permanent if not for a sudden threat to Wren's shop. A wealthy rival, envious of her growing reputation, and eager to please members of the Ashford family who disapproved of the match, began spreading false rumors about the quality of her work. Clients started canceling orders, and within days, Wren watched years of effort begin to crumble under lies she had no power to stop alone. When Julian heard what was happening, he did not hesitate. He arrived at her shop, not as a duke demanding control, but as a man asking how he could help without taking anything away from her. He offered his support publicly, defending her reputation among the very circles that once doubted her, yet he made it clear the choice of what happened next between them still belonged entirely to her. In that moment, Wren understood that love did not have to mean losing herself, and the wall she had built around her heart finally began to soften. With her business saved and her fears finally spoken aloud, Wren returned to Julian on her own terms. She did not walk into his home as a woman surrendering her freedom, but as one proposing a partnership built on equal footing. She told him plainly that she would keep her shop, keep her name recognized in her own right, and remain the same independent woman he had first met refusing him in a crowded ballroom. Julian listened without hesitation and agreed to every word, understanding that the version of her he loved was the one who never bent to please anyone, including him. News of their engagement spread quickly through the city, though this time the whispers carried admiration instead of doubt. People spoke of the seamstress who refused a duke and somehow won his heart without losing her own identity along the way. Duchess Eleanor, overjoyed to finally see her son at peace, welcomed Wren into the family with open arms, relieved that the 12 years of guarded rejection had finally come to an end for the right reason. Their wedding was small and different from anything the aristocracy expected from a duke. Instead of a grand cathedral filled with strangers, they chose a quiet garden surrounded only by the people who truly mattered to them. Julian stood before the small gathering and spoke openly about the woman who had refused him the very first time they met, admitting that her refusal had taught him more about honesty and respect than any proposal ever could. Wren, standing beside him in a gown she had designed herself, felt no fear of losing who she was. Her shop continued to thrive under her own name, and her marriage never asked her to choose between love and independence. Julian, once known only for the brides he turned away, became known instead for the one woman he refused to let go of, not because she obeyed him, but because she never once needed to. Together, they built a life where duty and freedom finally existed side by side, proving that sometimes the strongest love begins with the courage to say no.